Here's a question I'm sure a lot of you are asking right now. Is the president's attack on Iran legal? And one answer you might get is that yes, it is, under the War Powers Act. And what you might hear after that is that the War Powers Act allows the president to use military force as long as they give a notice to Congress within 48 hours. And then after 60 days, if Congress does not authorize the use of military force, then it must end. Other than that, the argument goes, the president is in the clear. They can do whatever they feel is necessary. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is not a correct rendering of what the 1973 War Powers Resolution, otherwise known as the War Powers Act, says. And in fact, it's a rendering of the War Powers Resolution that subverts its intention. It does the opposite of what the law was intended to accomplish. And so we're going to talk about that. First, a little background, because background and context are always important. The 1973 War Powers Resolution is passed at the tail end of America's war in Vietnam, and in particular, after the revelations of President Nixon expanding that war in Vietnam without congressional authorization to Cambodia. Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, are angry with Nixon's disregard of what they view as their prerogatives and discontented with what they understand to be almost 20 years of presidents engaging in military action with only limited consultation of Congress. And so they pass this bill. Nixon vetoes it. And in a rare instance, Congress overrides the veto to underscore the fact that they really mean this. They really care about this. Thus, we have the War Powers Resolution of 1973. Now, the principal aim of this law is to restrain the president's ability to make war without congressional authorization and consultation. Again, this is the most critical thing I'm going to tell you about this. The point of the law is to limit the executive. The larger constitutional theory here is that the Constitution doesn't cleanly delineate the powers to do war. Congress gets the power to declare war, also the power to raise an army and a navy, to build out the armed forces, to shape the departments that run the armed forces. But the executive gets this power to essentially prosecute the war, to make war. And somewhat inherent in the nature of executive power, and I'm somewhat skeptical of this idea of inherent powers, but this is a real one, is the ability to make war, is the ability to command. The president is the commander in chief. What's more, there will be circumstances when the nation is under attack and Congress can't meet. And so what does the nation do? Then it's the responsibility of the executive to respond. So you could say that the president has an inherent authority to respond to imminent threats without congressional authorization. But beyond that, there's a lot of fuzzy area. It's not exactly clear. And with the War Powers Resolution, Congress is making its claim to how all of this should work. Now let's go to the law itself. It's relatively short, 6 pages, and we're going to focus on some of the critical sections of the law. First, there's Section 2, subsection B, where Congress essentially explains where it gets the authority to pass this law. Under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it is specifically provided that the Congress shall have the power to make all laws necessary and proper for carrying into execution not only its own powers, but all of the other powers vested by the Constitution in the government of the United States, or any department or officer thereof. Now, what comes next is critical to understanding how this law works. Subsection C. The constitutional powers of the President as Commander-in-Chief to introduce the United States Armed Forces into hostilities or into situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated by the circumstances are exercised only pursuant to 1. A declaration of war, 2. Specific statutory authorization, or 3. A national emergency created by attack upon the United States, its territories or possessions, or its armed forces. To reiterate that, to restate that, the War Powers Resolution restates what Congress believes the Constitution to say, which is that the President can only introduce United States armed forces into imminent hostilities. Basically, you're about to start shooting. If there's been a declaration of war or an authorization of military force, and there's a whole conversation to have about how declarations of war fell out of favor and authorizations of military force became the main means through which Congress gave its assent to military action, or if there's an imminent threat to the homeland or its territories or its armed forces. Those 3 criteria are the criteria under which the president can lawfully deploy U.S. troops to imminent hostilities. And in the absence of those criteria, the use of military force is unlawful. Now, the reporting requirements are logically dependent on this. This isn't a statement and then the next set of things is unrelated. It's if then. If the use of military force is lawful, then this is what is supposed to happen. Section 3. The President in every possible instance shall consult with Congress before introducing United States Armed Forces into hostilities or into situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated by the circumstances, and after every such introduction shall consult regularly with the Congress until United States Armed Forces are no longer engaged in hostilities or have been removed from such situations. And then here we get Section 4, the specific criteria for notification. The President shall submit within 48 hours to the Speaker of the House of Representatives and to the President pro tempore of the Senate a report in writing setting forth the circumstances necessitating the introduction of the United States Armed Forces, the constitutional and legislative authority under which such introduction took place, and the estimated scope and duration of the hostilities or involvement. So the War Powers Resolution presupposes that the military action in question is lawful. Now, if this is an illegal military action, if it's unlawful, then Congress can just shut it down with the resolution. You don't need a whole new legal framework to stop the president from engaging in an unlawful war or military action. You can just tell him to stop. And in any case, part of the point of the War Powers Resolution is to create a set of circumstances, a framework under which presidents will be strongly encouraged to just inform the Congress about whatever military action they're going to take. Key thing you need to remember here is that these reporting requirements presuppose lawful military action. It presupposes some sort of congressional authorization or some sort of constitutional basis for the use of military force. If those aren't present, then the military action is unlawful. Now, part of why this might seem a little confusing is that congressional authorizations of military force can be open-ended. This is the case with the 2001 AUMF, which has been used in addition to the wars in Afghanistan to prosecute the drone war under Obama and prosecute actions under the first Trump administration and the Biden administration. The Iraq War in 2003 had to have a separate authorization of the use of military force, but they can be pretty broad-ended. And so a president can claim that they're using the authority of a prior authorization of the use of military force, but the point of the reporting requirements is for Congress to be able to evaluate that claim. If after 60 days Congress doesn't think that this military action really fits what they authorize, then the executive has to stop waging the war. I'm going to repeat myself again. This is all about accountability, all about presenting the executive from military adventures that don't have congressional authorization. What it's not is carte blanche for the executive to do whatever he pleases. What it's not is a pre-authorization for the use of military force whenever the president deems it's necessary. It is not a bill codifying the aphorism stating that it's better to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. It is a bill specifically meant to reorient presidential war-making powers around Congress. And so when people such as myself say the Trump action here is illegal, this is what they mean. What they're saying is that there is no extant congressional authorization of the use of military force that supports it, and because there's no apparent imminent threat, even according to American intelligence agencies, it is doubtful whether it falls under the president's Article 2 authority to wage war. There's no legal basis for the attack, and so it's illegal or unlawful if you don't want to go that far. But the point of this video is to make it as clear as possible. The War Powers Resolution, the War Powers Act, does not give the president unlimited authority to make war. It does the exact opposite. And claims that it does are attempts to mislead you into thinking that everything here is above board. This goes for Trump's action. This goes for any Biden actions that broke the law. This goes for any Obama actions that broke the law. This is just what the law is. And even though Congress doesn't seem very interested in enforcing the law, we should still care about it. When the public stops caring what the law and the Constitution means, then we'll know we've really lost everything.